get it, the customer gas on the stage.
This is the world's first portable gavel. Can you take the seats, please? Thank you very much. And I'm going to introduce Alan Blythe, and who tells me that I misspoke very severely at the beginning by saying that this was all going to be about taxation, because apparently it is going to be about everything except taxation. Yeah. So, Alan, you have the floor.
So, living down to expectations, this is going to be a presentation about the fund, and in comparison to the last speaker...
And I can't hear you, you've got to speak a little bit closer to it.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I get a lot of feedback there, okay. I certainly don't like the sound of my own voice, and I don't like my own picture. So fortunately, we're going to concentrate on the presentation. I'll leave a copy of the presentation with the rapporteur or the secretary, so if you have a website, it'll be made available on there later on. And in comparison to the last speaker, this is going from the sublime to the core blimey, because this is very detailed and very mundane, and but hopefully of interest to this group. In way of introduction, my name is Alan Blythe. I'm Chief of the Geneva office of the fund in Geneva. I was previously Chief of Financial Services in New York in the fund. And prior to that, for those of you who went on the CERN trip, I was actually at CERN. I was in the CERN Pension Fund. I was Chief of Financial Services of the CERN Pension Fund. So you've covered the whole background, you know all about me. If I tell you I'm married with 2 children, that's it, there's nothing left to say, so let's get on with the overview of the presentation. So basic structure, because of the noise that's been made about the fund in various areas, various fora recently, I thought I'd give you an overview of the financial situation, just so you can be reassured about the financial health of this institution to which you belong. Because the noise is also focused on we have 15,000 starving widows and orphans, I'm going to give you some details on the operational focus of the fund at the moment, and hope to convince you that it's not as dire as it's being made out. We have had issues. We were a bit slow to acknowledge that we had issues, which became an issue in itself. But we are now getting back on track. There's still some ways to go, but we are getting there. I will then focus on surviving spouse issues, because that's something that a couple of people have alerted me to is an issue here, so I will give you details of what you can do. I actually have a takeaway to add to your goodie bag, which is a one-page guide to say these are the documents we will need and who to contact if, when you die, what your surviving spouse has to do. And then web-based communication if we have time. Just as a guidance, how many of you are already logged on to member self-service in the fund? Show of hands, please. Okay. The member self-service of the fund on our website, have you rolled on member self-service? Okay, that's a fair number. So I might not bother with that because it's fairly long and tedious. I will just guide you to the website, and there's a very good video, YouTube video. My children laugh at me when I try to pretend I'm technically competent. There is something called the YouTube, and on the YouTube there is a YouTube video of how to on our website you can get, and a nice Canadian gentleman will take you through blow by blow, and even I could do it following it, so it must be easy, so it's good. And then of course there'll be questions and answers. So financial situation. For a pension fund, I won't get too technical, but there's various ways of looking at our financial situations. Short-term cash flow. Have we got enough money at the end of the month? You know, that's basic. There's the question of the value of the assets, the volume of assets are under management. But the more important aspects are actually not those figures that you intuitively understand. They're more linked to the actuarial position, which is a long-term view of the fund, and then asset liability coverage. So I don't wish to be rude, but you lot liabilities. It's a bit like my mum used to refer to me, oh Alan, you're just such a liability. That's not what I mean, but for the pension fund, we're now paying you. In the past, you were part of the asset base because you were contributing. Now you've gone to that great place on the other side of this desk, which is where you're receiving money, so you're a liability. So part of my role is to manage you. So we have to make sure that what we pay you doesn't become too much, and then what will be paid to me when I eventually get to the other side of the desk is not going to be too much either. So that's how we manage this entity called the fund, and I'll go over that in a bit more detail. So, what is the pension fund? I'm going to do a very simple graphic, which is when you were working, you were a participant in the fund, and you and your employing organisation were making contributions into the fund, basically a pool of assets. And because I'm a very simple guy, if somebody says pool, I think of water, so I colour it blue. So it's a pool of assets, it's the pension fund. And from that pool, we draw out some of the assets to invest. That's managed by my investment colleagues in New York. And we hope we generate an investment income which is recycled back into the pool of assets. And from that pool of assets, there are two drawdowns. There's the administration, which is my salary and other costs of running the fund. And then there's benefit expenditure, which is your benefit, and so the benefits that will pay to you. And so the key is to try and keep the whole thing in balance. And for as long as possible, make sure that pool remains as liquid and as full as possible, in very simple terms. So that's a very simple presentation of what the fund does. In terms of membership, I think it's significant for you to know the numbers. You belong to a big entity, and that's actually important. Size does matter. If you have size, you have assets, you have a good asset base, and you also have heft in the financial markets. So at the end of 2016, you were 128,000 members. So that's quite good. That's on the asset side, so that's good income. That's a good source of income for us. As you can see, since 2004, it's grown. So even for a mature fund like we are, we were established in 1949, 60 odd years old. That's quite a significant factor that since 2004, we have increased. In fact, when I joined this fund, part of my onboarding, such as it was, included the fact that they were expecting zero growth in the number of participants. As you can see, amongst another number of things, that wasn't quite true. We have had significant growth since 2002, which is good on the asset side. On the liabilities side, this is you lot. You keep growing as well, so you've increased in numbers over the same time period. You can see at the end of 2016, we were at 74,000. I apologise, it's not 2017, it's been audited and I'm not allowed to talk of the figures even if they're off by one at the moment, because last year we had a bit of an issue with the numbers that are recorded, so we have to make sure everything is tied down. So we're slightly late on the figures for 2017, but they will likely have gone up in the same proportions as well. I'd like you to retain that figure of 74,000, nearly 70,000 benefits, because as I already mentioned, there's rumours going around that we have 15,000 widows and orphans waiting for payment. I'd like you to draw a comparison between those two figures, and I'll come back to that later. In cash terms, and this is where we get into the short-term funding, this is what those figures actually mean. So in blue we've got the contributions coming in, and in red we've got the benefits being paid out. And as you can see, as is perfectly normal for a mature fund like us, we have a slightly higher figure for the expenditure going out each month than the monies that we're taking in. Okay. These are big figures. That's about 2.2 billion per year. And the excess benefit expenditure was $232 million US. The unit of account of the fund is dollars, so everything's taken back into dollars. To do the comparison, so we had net expenditure of $232 million for 2016. Now, if that was me, that would be a problem. Okay, 232 million excess expenditure in 2016. That would be a difficulty, it would be a major issue. However, I don't have that to back up that $232 million deficit, and that is the $65 billion that we have under management as at the end of 2017. Okay, we were just under, actually in fact I misspoke, it's 64 billion in 2017, it went up to over 65 billion at one stage and has moderated since. And that represents a substantial increase in assets over the time period that you can see before you, which is perfectly normal. So the 232 million deficit on an annual basis is more than well catered for by the asset coverage of 65 billion, 64 billion US dollars. In fact, according to the actuaries, it will take us somewhere in the region of 25 to 30 years before we start having to liquidate our investment positions. So combining the contributions income plus the income of our investments, we're liquid for 25 to 30 years before we start having to liquidate any of our investment positions, theoretically, all other things being equal. The one thing that's true, the only thing that is true about actuarial projections is reality is not going to be like that. It's always going to be wrong, but at least that's our best guess, and it's proven true so far. So we have a good asset coverage, and we have a good short-term cash prospect. We're not desperate for funds. But over the longer term, the position is slightly different. This is the actuarial position. This is the real meat and drink, if you like. This is the asset test for the fund. How far do the assets that we've accumulated and are likely to get in the future meet the liabilities going forward? So every 2 years we do an actuarial study. We have basically consulting actuary to perform an actuarial study under the orders, if you like, under the control of our actuarial committee. And they do a long-term projection comparing income flows to outgoing outflows, and then compare the likely development of our asset base to see if everything comes into balance. And as you can see, I've taken the figures back to 1978, and you can see back at the end of the 70s, we were in a deficit position. We had a significant deficit, 6.82% on this, to the far left. Then very wise people who preceded me in managing this entity took some decisions in the 1980s, and that corrected it. So we corrected through the 80s and 90s. We ended up with a significant surplus, in fact, back in the beginning of the century, 4.25%. Then we decided that we had to take account of the fact that we're all living longer. It's a good thing, generally, but from an actuarial position, if I wear my actuary's hat, it's a bad thing. So we have to take account of that, and that's what we did. And you can see that that actually changed the direction from the 4.25 maximum when we took account of the fact that we're all living longer, changed the actuarial tables, the longevity tables. That changed the direction, and we went into deficit again. This is normal. This institution evolves over time. It evolves with financial markets. The actuarial position is that as long as we evolve in a corridor of plus or minus 2% on this interpretation, we should be okay. It's perfectly normal. We don't need to panic. We don't need to be minded to do anything as long as we're in a corridor of plus or minus 2%. And you can see that from the low point back in the 1.87%, we now corrected. And at the end of 2015, we actually had a slight surplus. There'll be another actuarial estimate done on the figures as at the end of December. That will be going to the board this year and through the GA. So we're hopeful that we will continue to have a small, but hopefully a small surplus. So we can say that we're in good financial shape over the long term. Again, the long term is very long term. The actuaries actually assume the fund will exist in perpetuity. So it's going to be there to pay my pension when I get there. That's at least 7 years away for those of you who are curious. Yes, I know I look at Richard long, but it's at least 7 years now. My wife doesn't want me at home. Her line is that when I went with an estimate for an early retirement, she looked at the figures and said, "Is that all?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, basically what you're offering is half the money and twice the husband, and I don't want that." So, to talk seriously, that's, the actuarial position is sound. We hope it will be sound at the end of 2017. We need to manage various factors. We can't be over-generous in changing benefit provisions, so we can't give you all of, I think that is in the UK they proposed 10,000 to every 25-year-old. We're not going to give £10,000 to every 75-year-old. Sorry, that doesn't work. But overall, as long as we are prudent, we should be in good shape in the long term. Just to give you a final element of reassurance, and again, this is a theoretical exercise, and I want to double underline 32 point font. This is an assumption just as an intellectual game. We think the actuarial position is sound, but then somebody asks the question, okay, what if we close the fund? What if we suddenly decide we're no longer prepared to fund this? The organisations, the UN decides, no, it can spend that money elsewhere on peacekeeping, whatever else. So we do an exercise, and at 2015 said, okay, what if we close the fund today, as at the 31st of December 2015? Have we enough assets accumulated to pay everybody who's currently in payment and to pay those benefits which have been accrued up until then? And you can see on this presentation, or this table, on the top row, without pension adjustments, you can see at 2015 we had an asset coverage of 141%. So in other words, to pay everybody as at that time. At that moment, we had more than enough assets to pay off everybody as the liability or continue paying them. If you go to the second row, it's with the pension adjustment. You know the two-track system, we adjust for inflation, we adjust for foreign exchange. That's expensive, so the asset coverage is slightly less, but it's still 101%. So that's good asset coverage. We do have a solid financial institution to manage, and all other things being equal, we should continue to be healthy. Touch wood, inshallah. So I hope, going back to the beginning, we have covered the short term, medium term, and longer term. All the indicators are quite sound for this pension fund. Clearly, the world is not a safe place. We have various elements. covered by the previous speaker. We have Mr. Trump in the White House as the president. There's possibilities of, rather than the Trump bump, which was in 2017 and gave a record performance, there might be other things that fall out. We have seen lots. We've seen the 2000 crisis, we've seen the financial crisis in 2007, we've seen various other issues, we've seen the 1994 bond market crisis, we've seen the oil crises, we've seen lots of stuff going on. Through thick and thin, as long as we, over the long term, make the 3.5% real rate of return in dollars terms, the fund should continue to exist and is currently in good financial shape. Close that chapter. Any questions on that, just before I go into? Yes, sir.
Yes, you haven't mentioned
the microphone.
Microphone.
Hold it there, please. Not at the bottom.
You haven't mentioned one risk.
Your name.
Your name.
Oh yes, Ian O'Neill.
Hello, Ian.
Hello. You haven't mentioned one risk, that there'll be some greedy folks down at the United Nations Centre who will say, oh, there's a lot of cash over there, we could use that, just in the same way as Mr. Maxwell did in Britain for his particular reasons. Now, you know, they could just say, well, look, you claim to have all these excesses. We could use that. How safe is our fund?
Well, you're seeking from the actual financial position to a legal question. The assets of the fund are held on behalf of the fund, and the UN can't issue instructions. The assets are managed by the Investment Management Division, and they report to the SG. They would have to change the rules and regulations of the fund, and that would take the GA to do it. I can't say it's not possible because the GA is supreme, but there's no intention to do that at the moment. Currently, the assets of the fund are held separately for the benefit of the members, participants of the fund, and are solely used for that. They can't be used to finance UN operations. They can't be used to even as a sort of treasury loan to the UN to finance their operations. But it's held separately for and on behalf of the beneficiaries of the fund, beneficiaries and participants of the fund. And there would be a huge political price to pay if there was any suggestion those funds should be reallocated. It would actually technically be a misappropriation of funds for any other purpose other than paying pensions. They're specifically held uniquely for paying the pensions. Two more, maybe.
Hold it there, please. Not at the bottom.
Vicky Hyrey. I understand that there have been murmurings of New York investment firms wanting to take over the investment responsibilities for the pension fund. Is that just a complete rumour, or have there been any such things?
New York investment firms and London investment firms and Paris investment firms and Rome investment firms, any investment firm wants to help manage the UN assets. That's true. That's part of their operations. Whether they will be allowed to do so is a completely different issue. Currently, the vast majority of our assets are managed by the Investment Management Division, and there's no intention to change that approach. We feel that we have a good quality of investment manager employed inside the UNJSPF. We rely on external advisors for certain key specialist operations, such as real estate investment, where we don't have the expertise in-house. But other than that, all the investment, the vast majority of investment is going to be managed in-house and continue to be managed in-house. On several occasions, there have been suggestions that a valid investment approach is to go to passive management. You might remember a few years ago there was some scandal about whether we should go to passive management. That was accepted by the board, but we were so slow off the mark. This is the UN after all. We were so slow in implementing the policy decision that we actually missed the impact that it would have had on us by the financial crisis. So if we had been passively invested, we would have followed the financial crisis all the way down. We were impacted by the financial crisis, but to a lesser extent than if we'd been following the passive investment. So it's a time-consuming process, but at the moment there's no intention to go to external investment management. It's all mostly internal, except for those areas where we don't have the necessary expertise. Last one.
Susan Katzman, is there a possibility that the member states could say, in our countries, we've had to cut back on pensions, and that they could renege on their present percentage of contribution?
The member states don't actually belong to the fund directly. They have their voice to say through the governing bodies, but it's the member organisations who participate in the fund as an entity. So it'd be the member organisation which would have to stop paying. Sorry, the member states don't actually participate directly in the fund. It's the member organisations that are the management representatives. So an individual member state would be in default, would have to be in default in their contributions to the UN for it to have an impact on the UNJSPF. The member organisations, it would be difficult for them to stop contributing. We've had one example, the former GATT, the World Trade Organisation, left us. Anybody here remember the date? Sorry, it's just slipped my mind. Sometime back in the 2000s, I was still at CERN, and Bob Blythe, who set that up, came to see me. I don't think it's been a happy experience. I think member organisations are quite happy for it to continue as part of the UNJSPF. Member states, that's a different issue, that's a political issue. Theoretically, they could decide to not participate or reduce their costs. Some member states are in arrears, but it would be through their contributions, their assessment to the UN that would be impacted, not directly to the fund. Okay. One down, 3 to go. Next area of controversy, quality of service. Okay, 3rd of August 2015. Anybody here remember what they were doing on the 3rd of August 2015? I remember what I was doing. I was panicking because we were going live with our new computer system called iPads, and it was not a happy experience. So let's get that out there first of all. It was a huge change. Previously we'd had a bespoke mainframe system. We switched to an integrated database, one system. And not to beat about the bush, I think we dropped the ball. In fact, we dropped several balls in that implementation. I think other organisations have done the same. The UN itself, with its implementation of Umoja, has dropped several balls as well. These are very difficult projects, they're huge projects, and it's difficult to manage successfully. We have recognised that we weren't as successful as we thought we were going to be, and it has presented a certain number of challenges. We have taken certain actions to try and get back on track. We've established a number of task forces tasked with specific functions to try and get them back on track. And we think that having gone through the valley of tears, we are now back into, well, maybe not the sunless uplands, but at least we can see the path to get there. We're trying to stabilise our core functions back to basics. We've always put the emphasis on paying people, getting people into pension payment as soon as possible. The idea of keeping them liquid. So we put the emphasis with our task forces on there to pay the withdrawal settlements for people who had left the fund, and also for what's known as initial benefits. Those of you already in retirement on the 3rd of August 2015 should have had no impact. You should have continued to receive your monies with no perceptible difference. So I hope that was true, and we were happy because we had put the emphasis on keeping the payroll functioning, so that was the basic, keep our beneficiaries in pocket. Those new retirees suffered, unfortunately, because we did have issues with the way the system performed. We have now tried to fix that, and we're getting back on track. But we realised that there's a relationship with key stakeholders that was slightly damaged through that, because we didn't communicate well, we didn't handle the situation well. We made a mistake, and then we're maybe slow to acknowledge the fact that we had such difficulties. So now we're trying to re-establish that trust with the board, the organisations, participants and retirees. So these next slides are designed to try and give you some reassurance about that. This graphic takes in the overall performance. Our performance is how many benefits do we pay within 15 business days of the receipt of all required separation documents. So we need documentation from the organisation and from you to process a benefit. And as you can see, back in the dog days of 2015, we were only doing 10–12% of cases within the recognised benchmark of 15 days. So that's in the immediate aftermath of iPads going live. So staff didn't know the system wasn't performing as it had been designed, and we had a real problem on our hands because we weren't getting people into benefit. You can see the OAS report, the figures in red. They reviewed the period for January to June 2016, and they came up with 39% 2015, which had actually gone down to 24% in the first half of 2016. So we started off bad and we went even worse. So you can see we did have difficulties. Since then, you can see the figures going across. June 16, we're at 28%, then up to 27%. 2017, we're nearly at 60%, and then in October 2017, we're at 67%. So we're at the volume of cases being handled within a reasonable delay was growing. So we were back to 67%, more than 2/3, being handled within 15 days of the separation. So we have recovered. Is 2/3 in 15 days good enough? No. We should be up towards 90–95%. Once we've got all the documents, we should be able to get people into benefit quicker than that. We have made progress. We are still anxious that progress should continue to be made, but we are beset by difficulties. We did not get the resources we requested from the board or the GA and various other factors that play into that. But the situation has stabilised and we are getting back on track as far as this initial benefit calculation is concerned. One of the other issues is with the focus on initial benefit calculation, because we wanted to get people into payment as soon as possible, we focused on that to the detriment of other activity that we have to do. So were you recalculating? Were there other things that we deliberately put aside to focus on this? Now we've started going back and looking at the other stuff we have to do. It's having a negative impact on our overall processing. We are making progress. We are still in a relatively good position. And I'd like to share these figures with you. Now, this is real nitty-gritty stuff. We don't normally share these figures, but I asked permission to do so from the Deputy CEO. This is an internal working document. This is actually a confidential document that went to the UNSPC on this issue, just to try and convince people that we are dealing with the caseload as best we can, and where it is our responsibility, we are dealing with it. And this is in particular to the link of the 15,000 figures that I asked you to remember before. 15,000, the accusation circulating is that we have 15,000 orphans and benefits who are waiting for money. And that's the figure in red here, missing documents. If you think about it, we have a total payroll of some 78,000 benefits paid each month. So if you compare 15,000 to 78,000, unless you believe that we have nearly a fifth of our payroll that's not catered for, there can't be 15,000 widows and orphans waiting for a payment. The figures just don't rack up. And this is the answer here. That 15,000 figure is a figure where we have missing documents. So in other words, we're not able to process the benefit because we haven't received a document from either the beneficiary concerned or from the organisation concerned. So this is where the 15,000 figure comes from. It's part of the inventory. And if you look at this in more detail, you can see where that figures in. So these are figures from October 2017. And on the top you've got 33,987. That's our total inventory. So that's the cases that are open to us. Somebody somewhere has started a case in IPAS, and so it's out there. Of those 33,987, 12,800 had already been completed or were to be closed. So in other words, they'd started something and it completed, we processed the benefit, or the action had been completed, a change of payment instruction, whatever. Or were to be closed in the sense that there was no further action required, it was completed, just nobody had said close. There's a feature in the new system where you impact it, you say, okay, I want to process this, and then there's a further feature where you have to go close. It's the second stage, sometimes people forget to do it. 12,000 were of that kind, nearly 13,000. So we had missing documents for 15,000. These figures go together. And then of that 15,000, there was presumed actionable. So those are the ones where we think that we can actually go ahead. So you can see if you add those three figures together, the 15, the 12 and the 5, you get to the 33,000. So of that initial 33, in fact nearly 34,000, we had approximately 13,000 that were already complete or could be closed. We had missing documents of 15,000, so therefore we were left with a balance of the initial inventory of 5,000 cases. Of those 5,000 cases, 3,600 were not actionable. People had either deferred their choice or had not sent us the documents. They'd sent, okay, I'm waiting, because you know if you separate before you reach retirement age, you've got 3 years to decide because you might be re-employed. You've got 3 years to decide when you retire because you might not want the money straight away, you might not know where you're going to live, so although we've got the documents, you've not completed. So there was a number of cases where we didn't have any action to take it, or there was no further action to be taken. There was another batch, a smaller batch of 250 that were no longer actionable. So these were people who had separated, and the organisation had sent us the separation notification, they provided a PI, but then they'd got another job within the UN system with one of the member organisations. So therefore they were no longer actionable. So we had the case open, but in fact the person who was re-employed had re-entered would continue their membership. We had 700 pended, so in other words, we'd looked at the case and there was an issue. There was something wrong with the beginning contributory service date, there was an issue with a contribution reconciliation, or there were another item on the case that meant that we'd have to go back to the member organisation or the individual concerned and ask for further clarification before we could process. We had 359, nearly 360, where we're actually in the process of processing the benefit, so the benefit process, if you like, in really simple terms, is calculation, audit, release. So we have 3 people looking at each case to make sure everything's okay. So we had 360 that were in process. Okay. And now that leaves us, if you do the sums, with a balance of 492 actionable cases. So if you want to talk about the balance of cases, which is actually the fund backlog, so in other words, which is my bad, because I'm responsible for the Geneva office, so I'm responsible. We had a balance of under 500 cases. That's part of our normal individual. We process more than 1,000 cases per month, so that's a reasonable running total. It is not the 15,000 cases.
Okay. Could you put your mouth slightly closer to the microphone?
I'm sorry.
I think some people can't hear that. And we really have to finish about 12:15.
Okay, I'll go through. I will skip the signing on to the website. So the balance of figures is 500 rather than 15,000 if you want to talk about the backlog of figures that we have, the backlog of cases we have. Simple takeaway for you, if you look at the 78,000 cases in payment, unless you assume we have a huge tsunami of new cases to be processed, we can't have 15,000 cases that are waiting to be paid that are backlogged. Again, just to give you an idea, these are the percentages of figures that were handled. You can see the balance brought forward. We have a fairly consistent, this covers both Geneva and New York. We have a fairly steady balance at the bottom, the figures at the red figures at the bottom, somewhere between 300 and 500 per month. There's an outstanding balance per month. And the percentage underneath that is the percentage of cases that we're now processing in the same month. That's within the same month, that's not the 15 working days, but you can see there that we're in a fairly healthy position that somewhere between 70 and 80% of cases that come to us and that can be processed are now being processed within the same month. In the interest of full disclosure, I gave you this graph earlier on and we were up to October. You can see in December it turned down and unfortunately it has continued to go down. We've taken certain mitigation measures. We've established another task force back in New York and another one in Geneva to try and bring those figures back around through the first part. This is just another breakdown of the 15,000 cases that I spoke about earlier. These are the cases that divide between death, marriage and birth certificate was missing, so we had to go back to the organisation. We had a separation document and payment instruction where that was broken down by various items. Payment instruction was missing and then separation document. So the non-actionable workflows of missing documents are broken down there, just to show you that we have a handle on the cases. The problem with this approach is that it's a dynamic and fluid situation. So we took the pain of actually doing this analysis. We don't have the staff resources to be able to do this sort of detailed breakdown on a daily basis. It's a luxury. We can't take a balance sheet snapshot every day. What we do know is that we're processing cases, we're processing record numbers of cases. We're not going to have the backlog that's been bandied around. The death after service cases, because I know that's a sensitive issue, according to the figures that we took, we had a balance of December 2017 of 1,377 cases where somebody had died, the participant died. So of that balance, we had 179 cases where we had no death certificate, so we had notified of the death, but we hadn't received a death certificate, but no benefit was in fact payable, there was no survivor. There was a 511, which is possible termination. Again, we didn't know there, but we're thinking there are no survivors left, so again, there'll be no payment pending, no payment due. We had 396 cases pended, so in other words, we'd reviewed nearly 400 cases and discovered there was an issue with the case, so we had to go back to the former employing organisation, the estate or the spouse, to ask for further information. And we had 116 that were in the pipeline that were actually being processed, so that was either at the audit release or recalculate stage, so we had that. Again, the actual cases outstanding were 175, not the 1,377. So I'd ask you to be very careful in listening to figures. What are people actually talking about? What are they doing? Again, for death cases, we had 175. Yes, that's bad. We should be able to deal with those. We are doing, but it's not the 1,377 headline figure. We are taking action. We're trying to improve the situation overall. The staff pension committees of organisations could be helped. We've given them access to our system. They've got more access than they ever had. They've got access to our participant records and certain other documents, and they're in a good position to be able to tell us what's the position of these cases. And we're also trying to extend the forum where we can get some expertise within member organisations, so that particularly within the UN family, UNICEF, etc., where we would have key counterpoints who become pensions experts within their organisation and therefore able to help us, where they can go and look for the document that's missing, and they'd have more credibility than Alan Blythe calling somebody and saying, I need this document, well, who are you and why do you need it? If I can go via somebody else in their organisation, that would be a much more effective way. So that's what we're trying to set up, and we hope that over time we will have a much more flexible workforce. My last section approaches. I've got 10 minutes. Any questions on the backlog, the previous? Okay, I'm going on. Survivors' benefits. I have here a printout of a summary of what I'm going to say. Basically, it's a list of the documents you will need. It has Mercedes Burgett, who is the colleague who was with me on Friday. Her name is on it and her contacts. So this is what you're going to maybe have to do for your surviving spouse if you were to die. So again, questions and answers. If I pass away, will my spouse have a right to a pension? The answer is yes. The survivor's benefit is payable to your surviving spouse if you have the right to a monthly pension. And if the spouse has been married to you prior to your separation from service and stays married to you until death. Good news, bad news, I'm not sure, but the two is you have to be married before you separated from the organisation, and you have to stay married. Okay, so my wife, who says half the money, twice the husband, I'll show her. Under what circumstances will my spouse not be entitled to a benefit? So a widow's benefit would not be payable if you separated from service prior to the 1st of April 2001 and you took a deferred retirement benefit with a lump sum. So if you happen to be in that circumstance, that taking a lump sum before that date cancelled the spouse benefit, so be careful if you do that. Alternatively, if you married after your separation from service and no annuity has been purchased, so if you married after you separated from service, so basically if you retired and then you found the love of your wife who'd been missing while you're busy saving the world, then you have to go and buy an annuity. Those details are on our website. What will the spouse need to do to establish the survivor's benefit? We review your file and we see what documents are ready with the fund, and then we will write to the spouse and ask for documents. Please be aware that we share information but not documentation with your former employing organisation. So you might well have given a marriage certificate or a birth certificate to the organisation when you were working. That has not come to us. We've just been informed that you were married and had children and whatever. We don't see the documentation. That's why we ask to see a copy of the document when this comes through. These are the new legal definitions. You can't read it on the screen. It will be part of the presentation. Basically, there's a list of documents. This is all summarised in the document in a very simple form, very pragmatic form that's available at the front. I'll put on the desk with the other documents. Take a copy and just look at the content. It's relatively straightforward. This is the form you will need to fill in. You can keep the original signature. We won't accept fax or photocopy. There needs to be an original signature on this one. This is the certification that we remain married. This is the payment instruction. If you have a joint account and the bank accepts to keep the account open, you can already fill in the payment instruction. If not, the surviving spouse will possibly have to open their own bank account, but send the details through to us. Witnessing of your spouse's signature. The UN pension can bring the documents to our office, or it can be any official of the United Nations system, or local government authorities, so town hall, consular authorities, anybody with, in the UK, I think probably the easiest would be a justice of the peace. I think I would be minded to accept a signature of an authorised justice of the peace, or the town hall, the electoral office of your local council. How much will the spouse receive as widow's benefit? Half of the retiree's full pension before any lump sum. So if the retiree took a lump sum, we will calculate what that pension would have been without the lump sum and then pay half of that amount to the surviving spouse. The amount is payable for life and is adjusted for the cost of living adjustment. If the surviving spouse were to remarry, we continue paying the benefit. There's no remarriage penalty to do away with that. That existed a few years ago, but that was done away with. So anybody who chooses to remarry, that will continue to be paid in benefit there. If you die mid-month, the spouse has the right to the full pension, so there will be a full month's pension due, even if the spouse dies in the first few days of the month. And how long, this is the key question, how long would the spouse have to wait to receiving her survivor's pension, his or her survivor's pension? If the dossier is in good order, we'll try and do it within 15 working days. We have, amongst all the noise that's been going on, one of the areas that we've really given attention to has been the surviving spouse benefit, because we were aware there was particularly delicate cases. So one of the task forces was centred in Geneva, and they dealt specifically with surviving spouse cases to make sure that the delays were done away with as soon as possible. What can I do to facilitate the establishment of my spouse's pension? You should set up a file. Okay? I don't think it's too much to ask. I think that you can appreciate that when you die, your spouse will probably not be in a mindset to be dealing with the administration of the pension fund. So why don't you set up a file? You can pre-fill out most of the forms. You can fill out the E2 form, which is the requested thing. If you have a joint account, you can give us you can already, and the bank says, yes, this account will continue to operate, you can already fill out the bank account number. Then you should keep the E2 form, which is the request for a pension, and the bank document in the pension file. Don't send it straight away. Okay, just keep it there. Maybe leave a note to your spouse and say, dearest, if the fortune should happen, this is where you will find the file, and this is the content, and this is where you need to send it. What you can do now is send a copy of all certificates. So your marriage certificate, birth certificate, copy of the official ID, so basically a copy of the spouse's passport, preferably with a copy of the signature and a photo of the signature. Send all that to us. We can put it on your file. We may have to come back to you and ask for an updated version, because some of these could hopefully be historic. I hope nobody here will die in the next 25, 30 years, but it could be historic. So we are sometimes stupid, and sometimes the document goes astray. So it's just possible that you sent it to us, and then with our filing system, somebody's scanned it and it's gone into the wrong document. Bear with us, but at least if you can send something to us, if we have a trace of something, that facilitates the fact we know you exist, we know you're in need, and we can get back to you sooner. As I said, there's a document here that covers in more detail all the documents you require. Please don't hesitate to send the copies of certificates, marriage certificates, birth certificates, divorce decrees if it's the case as well, just so your file is as full and complete as possible. The technical people tell me that the electronic filing system is theoretical, it can go forever. So there's a challenge for you. Bombard us with documents. We will not possibly acknowledge straight away, but know that the document sent to us, it will get into your file. We might have to come back to you because there's a question when the unfortunate happens, but the most you can do by sending us stuff now, we can create the dossier, it will facilitate review of the folder when the unfortunate happens. The next stage was to be internet access. I would encourage you all to go to our website, which looks like this, and then go onto the beneficiary tab. If you access our website, there are YouTube videos which will show you how to claim your UID, your unique identifier, and various other things. And there's also one showing you how to register. So before you register, you can actually get the register. It's a very simple process. I won't spend more time because I'm aware we have to finish. This will be in the copy that's left with you. You can go through this if you're paper-based like me. If you're internet savvy, you can go and watch the YouTube video. My children say there's a lot of interesting stuff on there too, which should interest me, but I've never really taken the time to look. But the 2 YouTube videos on our web you can access through our website are very helpful. So I will pause there for further questions, comments.
Yeah, Ian O'Neill. Sorry? Do it from here. Okay, Ian O'Neill. The question is, okay, we send in the copies of all the important documents, including the passport and so on. Now we renew the passports. Do we now have to renew the file?
No, you send in the new passport. Send it, scan it, and send it, and say this is an updated passport.
Oh, so you do have to...
Well, you don't have to renew the whole file, but a document which changes, yes, certainly. That's why I said we might have to get back to you because it could be 20, 25 years, so just keep it. If you, and if something changes, then notify us.
Okay, yeah.
My colleagues hate me because they get bombed submerged with documents after this sort of event, but that's fine. That's their problem.
Thank you. Sorry, Edward Mortimer. Two sort of slightly related questions. One, what about a surviving disabled child? And secondly, this is obviously all about pensions. Is dealing with after-service health insurance a completely separate issue that you have nothing to do with at all? Thank you.
Yes, the health insurance is completely separate, so you'd have to go to your provider. The only thing the fund does is to deduct the premium off your pension if you instruct us to do so. For the disabled child, the benefit should be payable for life, but if I don't want to go into individual cases, please come and see me afterwards, or my staff at Client Services will certainly be able to advise you or anybody else on that particular item.
I think the next question is going to have to be the last one, because we have to be finished this and out before 1 o'clock when somebody else has the room.
Yeah. Sue Block-Tyrrell, just quickly, is there on the member self-service section a box that we can see if we've already sent you the marriage certificate, the passport and things like that?
There is a box. Unfortunately, it's been deactivated for the moment because it was one of the issues. So our aim is to have two things. One, a box where we will say yes, documents have been received, so you can follow whether you provided it, and also for going paperless. But the going paperless option has also been suspended because it's one of the teething difficulties we had in implementing the system. Over the longer term, we will both be going paperless, and you'll be able to be more autonomous in following up in the system that yes, the fund has received your document. For your benefit, you should be able to see your benefit disbursement. That's definitely a feature that's active on the web. If you go through member self-service, you can see the disbursement. If you go on the disbursement, you can see your monthly benefit. You'll see it on our website before it will be credited to your bank. And for as long as you can see on the file it's reconciled, that means that as far as the fund is concerned, the payment's been issued to the bank has issued to the payment, it has issued a payment to your bank, and we think it's all done. If you see something else there, then you need to contact the fund and see what the situation is. But that's a useful feature, and there's maybe persuade people to go and register on member self-service so you can see the status of disbursement. You'll see the disbursement a few days before you actually see the money on your bank account.
I'm afraid I think that's all we have time for, because of the time constraint that we have. I must say I find it very interesting, a little bit chilling, particularly the section on survivors' benefits. I had rather hoped to live forever, or that at the very least the world would end before I did, but it's a sad reality that may not be the case.
My own view with my wife, bless her, is that I comfort myself with the thought that she might prove me.
Oh, well, that's chilling in its own way. Can I thank you, Alan, very, very much indeed. I thought that was very clear, very helpful, and it may have dispelled one or two of the more persistent myths. And if any of you have very burning issues, I get the sense that Alan is here and is available. Thank you very much. Can we show our appreciation?